The afternoon sun was bright and warm as Lisa walked down the busy street in downtown Manhattan. She had just spent the last 4 hours at the community center, helping elderly folks learn how to use their smartphones. Her jeans had a small paint stain on them from when she helped touch up the center's walls last week. Her white cotton blouse was simple and comfortable, nothing fancy. She wore her favorite pair of worn sneakers because she knew she'd be on her feet all day. Lisa loved her volunteer work. It made her feel connected to real people, to the heartbeat of the city. Money and status never impressed her much, even though she had access to more wealth than most people could imagine in their lifetime. But that was her husband's world, not really hers. She preferred spending her Tuesday afternoons teaching Mrs. Rodriguez how to video call her grandchildren, rather than attending fancy charity galas. Her stomach rumbled. She had skipped breakfast and now it was past 2 in the afternoon. Lisa spotted a restaurant across the street called Le Bernardin. She had heard people mention it before, something about it being exclusive and high-end, but she just needed some food. How fancy could lunch really be? The restaurant had tall glass doors and a doorman in a crisp uniform standing outside. Lisa felt a bit underdressed but pushed the thought away. She was hungry, she had money to pay, and it was just lunch. The doorman opened the door for her, though she noticed his smile seemed forced when he looked at her clothes. Inside, the restaurant was beautiful. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and the tables were covered in white linen that looked too perfect to touch. Soft classical music played in the background. Well-dressed people sat at various tables speaking in hushed tones. Women wore elegant dresses and expensive jewelry. Men had on suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Lisa immediately felt out of place, but she was already inside. Turning back now would be awkward. She approached the host stand where a tall man in an impeccable black suit stood reviewing a leather-bound reservation book. His name tag read Richard. "Good afternoon," Lisa said politely, offering a friendly smile. "Do you have a table available for one?" Richard looked up from his book. His eyes traveled from her face down to her sneakers and back up again. The journey his eyes took lasted only a few seconds, but Lisa felt every moment of it. His expression shifted from professional neutrality to barely concealed disgust. "Do you have a reservation?" he asked, his tone cold. "No, I don't. I was just hoping you might have something available. Even a small table would be fine." Richard let out a small sigh as if Lisa was inconveniencing him greatly. "Madame Le Bernardin Noir requires reservations. We're fully booked." Lisa glanced past him into the dining room. She could clearly see at least 4 empty tables. "Oh, I can see some tables that are open. Would it be possible to just grab a quick lunch? I don't need anything elaborate." Richard's jaw tightened. He closed his reservation book with a sharp snap. "Those tables are reserved. Besides, we have a strict dress code here. I'm afraid your current attire doesn't meet our standards." The words hit Lisa like cold water. She looked down at her clothes. Sure, she wasn't dressed fancy, but she was clean and presentable. "I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I was just volunteering nearby and thought I'd grab something to eat. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the establishments more suited to your..." He paused, letting his eyes roam over her outfit again. "Budget. There's a fast food place 2 blocks down, or a deli around the corner." Heat rushed to Lisa's cheeks. A couple at a nearby table had stopped their conversation and were watching. An older woman in a fur stole whispered something to her companion, both of them staring at Lisa. "I can pay for my meal," Lisa said quietly, trying to maintain her dignity. "I just wanted some lunch." Richard leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice, but somehow making it sound even more condescending. "Ma'am, this is one of the finest restaurants in the city. Our average entree starts at $85. I don't think you understand the type of establishment this is. We cater to a certain clientele, people of a certain standing." The implication was clear. He had judged her bank account based on her sneakers. He had decided she didn't belong based on her jeans. Never mind that the credit card in her simple canvas purse could probably buy his restaurant several times over. Never mind that she was married to a man whose net worth was in the billions. None of that mattered because she didn't look the part. "I understand," Lisa said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt her eyes starting to burn with tears but refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of these people." "I'm glad we could clear this up," Richard said with a fake smile that never reached his eyes. "I'm sure you'll find something more appropriate elsewhere. Have a good day." Lisa turned and walked toward the door. Every step felt like a mile. She could feel eyes on her back. The whispers seemed to grow louder, though she couldn't make out the words. The doorman opened the door for her, and she stepped back out into the bright afternoon sun. The door closed behind her with a soft thud that felt like a punctuation mark on her humiliation. Lisa stood on the sidewalk for a moment, trying to collect herself. People rushed past her on the busy street, everyone absorbed in their own worlds. No one noticed the woman standing there, fighting back tears over a simple lunch that never happened. She started walking, not really sure where she was going. Her appetite was completely gone now, replaced by a hollow feeling in her stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. How could someone treat another person like that? She had been polite, respectful, and all she wanted was a meal. But because she didn't wear the right clothes, because she didn't look wealthy enough, she had been dismissed, embarrassed, and sent away. Lisa had never been the type to flaunt her husband's money or status. She had married David for love, not for his wealth. In fact, when they first met 15 years ago at a small bookstore, she had no idea he was wealthy at all. He was just a kind, intelligent man who loved to read as much as she did. The money came later, after his tech company exploded into one of the most successful businesses in the world. Even as David's wealth grew, Lisa insisted on living a relatively normal life. They had a nice house, sure, but nothing like the mansions his peers owned. She drove a regular car, shopped at normal stores, and spent her free time volunteering instead of attending endless social events. She had turned down countless invitations to join exclusive clubs and organizations. That lifestyle had never appealed to her. But maybe, she thought as she walked aimlessly down the street, maybe there was a price to pay for choosing to live simply. Maybe this was what happened when you didn't wear your wealth like armor. People judged you. People dismissed you. People like Richard at Le Bernardin Noir decided you weren't worth their time or respect. By the time Lisa got home, the sun was beginning to set. She had walked for hours trying to process what had happened, trying to understand why it hurt so much. It wasn't just about being denied lunch. It was about being made to feel less than human, about being judged and found wanting based on nothing but appearance. She sat in her car in the driveway for a few minutes, looking at her house. Through the kitchen window, she could see David moving around, probably starting dinner. He always cooked on Tuesdays because he knew she'd be tired from volunteering. The thought of his kindness, his constant thoughtfulness, made her eyes fill with tears again. Lisa wiped her face, took a deep breath, and went inside. She would tell him she had a good day. She would smile and ask about his meetings. She would pretend that her afternoon had been normal and uneventful. Because what was the point of telling him? What was done was done. She had been humiliated, and there was nothing anyone could do to change that. At least that's what she thought. David was humming quietly to himself as he chopped vegetables for dinner. He had left work early, which was rare for him, but Tuesdays were special. These were the evenings he made sure to be home when Lisa returned from her volunteer work. He loved hearing about her day, about the people she helped, about the small victories and funny moments that always seemed to happen at the community center. He heard her car pull into the driveway and smiled. But when Lisa walked through the door, something was wrong. He could see it immediately. After 15 years of marriage, he knew his wife's face better than his own. She was smiling, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her shoulders were tight with tension, and she was home much later than usual. "Hey, sweetheart," David said, setting down his knife and walking over to kiss her cheek. "How was your day?" "Good," Lisa said, her voice almost too bright. "It was fine. Same old stuff at the center." Mrs. Chen finally figured out how to send text messages, so that was exciting. David studied her face. "You sure everything's okay? You seem, I don't know, off somehow." "I'm just tired," Lisa said quickly, moving past him to set her purse on the counter. "What are you making?" "Smells good." "Stir fry," David replied, not taking his eyes off her. "Your favorite?" "Lisa, you're home 2 hours later than usual. Did something happen?" "I just walked around for a bit after volunteering." "Needed some air. It's a beautiful day." David knew she was lying, or at least not telling him everything, but he also knew his wife well enough not to pew. She's too hard. Lisa would talk when she was ready. Still, concern gnawed at him. Something had upset her. Something had hurt her. He could see it in the way she wouldn't quite meet his eyes. They moved through the evening in a careful dance. David kept the conversation light. talking about his day at the office, about a funny email his assistant had sent him, about the new dog their neighbors had adopted. Lisa responded, even laughed at appropriate moments, but there was a distance there. A wall she had put up. Dinner was quiet. Lisa pushed her food around her plate more than she ate it. David's concern deepened. His wife loved his stir-fry. She always had seconds, but tonight she barely touched her first serving. "Not hungry?" he asked gently. Lisa looked down at her plate as if seeing it for the first time. "I guess I'm more tired than I thought." "It's really good, though. You didn't eat lunch today, did you?" The question was simple, innocent even. But David saw Lisa freeze, saw her hand tighten on her fork. There was the crack in the armor. "Wasn't very hungry at lunchtime," she said, quietly. "Lisa." David set down his own fork and reached across the table to take her hand. "Baby, please talk to me. Something happened today. I can see it. You're hurt about something." For a long moment, Lisa didn't respond. She just stared at their joined hands on the table. David watched as her eyes filled with tears, watched as she blinked them back, watched as she fought to keep her composure. His chest tightened. Someone had hurt his wife. Someone had made this beautiful, kind woman feel small. "It's stupid," Lisa finally whispered. "It shouldn't bother me this much. If it bothers you, it's not stupid. Tell me what happened." The story came out slowly at first, then faster, like a dam breaking. Lisa told him about being hungry after volunteering, about seeing the restaurant and thinking it would be fine, about the way Richard had looked at her, the way his eyes had traveled over her clothes with such obvious disdain, about being told she didn't meet their standards, that she should try the fast food place down the street, about the whispers and stares from other diners, about walking out of that restaurant feeling worthless. As David listened, a cold anger began building in his chest. He kept his face calm, kept holding Lisa's hand gently, but inside he was furious. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger, but the cold, calculating kind that made him successful in business. The kind that meant he was about to make moves and changes. "What was the name of the restaurant?" he asked quietly. "David, no. I don't want you to make a big thing out of this. I just want to forget it happened." "The name, Lisa?" She sighed. "Le Bernardin Noir, but seriously, just let it go." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You came home 2 hours late because you were so upset you just walked around the city. You barely ate dinner. You've been fighting back tears all evening. That's not fine." Lisa pulled her hand back and stood up, starting to clear the dishes. "What are you going to do, David? March down there and tell them who you are? Make them feel bad because they insulted a billionaire's wife? That's not going to change anything. People like Richard will still be out there, judging people, making them feel small." David stood too, gently taking the plates from her hands and setting them back on the table. He pulled his wife into his arms, holding her close. She resisted for a moment, then melted against him, finally letting the tears fall. "I felt so embarrassed," she whispered against his chest. "So worthless. Like I was nothing just because I wasn't wearing the right clothes." "You are worth everything," David said fiercely. "Everything. And you're right that marching down there and throwing my name around wouldn't change anything. But that doesn't mean I'm going to do nothing." Lisa pulled back to look up at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean that no one should be treated the way you were treated. Not you, not anyone. Everyone deserves basic human dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or how much money they have." David cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "I can't undo what happened to you today. I can't take away the hurt, but maybe I can help make sure it doesn't keep happening to other people." "David, what are you planning?" He smiled, but there was steel in it. "I don't know yet, but I'm going to think about it. For now, let's just be together, okay?" They moved to the couch, Lisa curling up against David's side like she used to when they first got married. He held her and let her talk, really talk, about how the incident made her feel, about how it brought up old insecurities from when she was younger and didn't have money, about how she had thought she was past caring what people thought of her, but apparently she wasn't. David listened to every word, storing each detail away. He asked questions. What time had she gone to the restaurant? What exactly had Richard said? Were there other staff members present? What were the names of the dishes on the menu board? Lisa answered, thinking he was just helping her process, not realizing he was gathering intelligence. Later that night, after Lisa had fallen asleep, David lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind was already working, already planning. He had built a tech empire from nothing by being smart, strategic, and patient. He knew how to research, how to investigate, how to find leverage. Most importantly, he knew how to create change. Le Bernardin Noir thought they could humiliate his wife and face no consequences. They thought that because Lisa had walked in looking ordinary, she could be dismissed and forgotten. They had no idea who she was. More importantly, they had no idea what her husband was capable of. David wasn't going to make a scene. He wasn't going to storm in and make threats. That was crude, ineffective, and wouldn't create lasting change. No, he was going to do something much more thorough. He was going to do his homework. He was going to learn everything about that restaurant. And then he was going to make sure that what happened to Lisa never happened to anyone else. He turned his head to look at his sleeping wife. Even in sleep, there was a small furrow between her eyebrows, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there this morning. Someone had put that there. Someone had taken his wife's peace and joy and replaced it with shame and hurt. That, David thought, was unacceptable, and he was going to do something about it. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, being careful not to wake Lisa. He typed out a message to his head of security and research. I need a complete background check and financial analysis. Company name, Le Bernardin Noir, Manhattan. I need everything. Ownership, employees, finances, health inspection records, customer complaints, everything. Keep it quiet. I'll explain tomorrow. The response came back within minutes. Understood. We'll have preliminary report by morning. David set his phone down and pulled Lisa closer. She murmured something in her sleep and snuggled into his warmth. He kissed the top of her head and closed his eyes. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Richard at Le Bernardin Noir had made a very expensive mistake. He just didn't know it yet. 2 weeks had passed since that awful afternoon at Le Bernardin Noir. Lisa had mostly moved past it, or at least she told herself she had. She stayed busy with her volunteer work, spending extra time at the community center and even taking on a new project, helping recent immigrants learn English. David, on the other hand, had been busy in a very different way. He hadn't mentioned the restaurant incident again to Lisa, didn't want to keep bringing up something that hurt her. But he had been working, quietly, carefully, methodically, the way he always worked when something mattered. His security team had delivered their first report within 24 hours. David had read it 3 times, making notes, asking follow-up questions. Then he requested deeper digs, financial records, ownership history, employee backgrounds, customer reviews from every platform, health department reports, business licenses, everything. The picture that emerged was far more troubling than David had initially imagined. This wasn't just about one bad day or one rude employee. This was systemic. This was a pattern, and it had been going on for years. David sat in his home office late on a Wednesday night reviewing the latest round of reports. His assistant, Tom, had compiled everything into a detailed presentation. David scrolled through it slowly, his jaw tightening with each new slide. Le Bernardin Noir had been in business for 12 years. The owner, a man named Gerard Blanc, had opened it with family money after training in Paris. The restaurant had quickly gained a reputation for exclusivity and fine dining. But buried beneath the glowing reviews from wealthy patrons was something much uglier. David found customer reviews that told stories eerily similar to Lisa's experience. A nurse coming off a double shift, still in scrubs, turned away despite having a reservation. A college student celebrating getting into law school denied service because he looked too young and casual. An elderly woman wearing her late husband's old jacket for sentimental reasons told the restaurant was not appropriate for her demographic. The pattern was clear. If you didn't look wealthy, you weren't welcome. It didn't matter if you actually had money. It didn't matter if you could pay. What mattered was appearance, status, the right clothes, the right look. And if you didn't fit that narrow definition, people like Richard made sure you knew you weren't wanted. But David found something else too, something that made this even worse. Former employees had posted on job review sites about being specifically instructed to turn certain people away. One waiter wrote about being told to judge customers by their shoes, their watch, their handbag. Another server described being reprimanded for treating a poorly dressed customer with too much respect. We were taught to protect the restaurant's image, one former host had written. That meant keeping out anyone who didn't look like they belonged. The manager told us we were gatekeepers, Our job was to make sure only the right kind of people got in. David felt sick reading it. This wasn't just Richard being a jerk. This was policy. This was intentional. Gerard Blanc had created a culture of discrimination and elitism, and he profited from it while people like Lisa were humiliated. There was more in the reports. Financial information that Tom had managed to obtain through public records and some creative research. Le Bernardin Noir was in trouble. Despite its reputation, the restaurant was bleeding money. Gerard had taken on significant loans to keep up appearances, to maintain that image of exclusivity. The crystal chandeliers, the expensive decor, the prime location, all of it cost money that the restaurant wasn't really making. According to Tom's analysis, Le Bernardin Noir was maybe 6 months away from serious financial trouble, a year away from potentially closing. The irony wasn't lost on David. Here was a restaurant that turned people away for not looking wealthy enough, and it was going broke doing it. Then David found the piece of information that changed everything. The building that housed Le Bernardin Noir was owned by a real estate investment company. And according to Tom's research, that company was planning to sell. The building would be on the market within the next month. It was a prime piece of Manhattan real estate. The price would be steep, probably somewhere around $45 to $50 million. David sat back in his chair thinking. An idea was forming, something bigger than just getting back at one restaurant, something that could actually create change. He called Tom into his office the next morning. His assistant arrived with coffee and a notepad, ready to take notes as always. "The building that Le Bernardin Noir is in," David said without preamble. "It's going on the market soon. I want to buy it." Tom's eyebrows went up slightly, but he just nodded and made a note. He had worked for David long enough to know that when his boss made a decision, there was always a good reason behind it. "I'll reach out to the sellers. Should I use one of our existing LLCs or set up something new?" "Set up something new. I don't want anyone connecting this to me yet. Make it look like just another real estate investment company. Can you have everything ready to make an offer as soon as it lists?" "Absolutely." "What's your budget?" "Whatever it takes to make sure we win the bid. Offer above, asking if you need to." "I want this building, Tom, and I want it fast." Tom made more notes. "Got it. Anything else?" David leaned forward, his fingers steepled together. "I need you to do something else for me. Something a bit unusual." "Okay. I need someone to go to Le Bernardin Noir and try to get a table. Someone young, dressed casually, jeans, hoodie, sneakers. Have them try to make a reservation for dinner." Tom looked confused but intrigued. "You want to test if they'll turn someone away based on appearance?" "Exactly. Get it on video if possible. Phone recording is fine, just make sure it's legal. I need documentation of how they treat people who don't look wealthy." "I can do that myself if you want," Tom offered. "I've got a pretty casual wardrobe at home." David smiled. "That would be perfect, actually." "Thank you." "And then what?" "Then I want you to go back a few hours later, same day if possible. But this time dress up. Expensive suit, nice watch, the whole thing. Try to get a table again. I want to see if they treat you differently." Understanding dawned on Tom's face. "You're building a case, documenting the discrimination." "I'm gathering evidence," David corrected. "Evidence that will help me make my point when the time comes." Over the next week, things moved quickly. Tom made the offer on the building the day it listed. As David had instructed, he went in high, offering $47 million for a property listed at $43 million. The sellers accepted immediately, happy to get above asking price and to close quickly. Meanwhile, Tom carried out David's other request. On a Tuesday afternoon, he showed up at Le Bernardin Noir in jeans and a hoodie, looking like he'd just come from playing basketball. He had his phone recording in his pocket, set to capture audio. The reception was exactly what David had expected. Richard, the same host who had turned Lisa away, barely looked at Tom before informing him the restaurant was fully booked for months. When Tom asked about walk-in availability, Richard's tone became condescending, suggesting Tom might be more comfortable at less formal establishments. Tom left after a few minutes of back and forth, the whole encounter captured on audio. 3 hours later, Tom returned. This time, he wore a custom-tailored suit that cost more than most people's monthly salary. He had on an expensive watch and carried himself with the confidence of someone who belonged in expensive places. He walked up to the same host stand, to the same Richard who had dismissed him hours earlier. The difference was night and day. Richard didn't recognize Tom at all, too focused on the expensive clothes to look at the face. He immediately became accommodating, friendly even. "Of course, sir, we'd be delighted to have you dine with us. I have a wonderful table available right now if you're interested, or I could make you a reservation for any evening you prefer." Tom made a reservation for the following week, thanked Richard politely, and left. The entire interaction was recorded just like the first one. When Tom brought the recordings to David's office the next day, they both listened in silence. "It's disgusting," Tom said quietly when the second recording ended. "The difference in how he treated me. Same person, same day, just different clothes." "It's discrimination," David said flatly. "Pure and simple. And now we have proof. So what's next?" David pulled up a document on his computer. It was the deed to the building, now officially owned by one of his shell companies. Billionaire didn't know it yet, but they had a new landlord, and their lease was up for renewal in 3 months. "Now," David said with a small smile, "we set up a meeting. Gerard Blanc thinks he's meeting with the new property owner to discuss his lease renewal. What he's actually walking into is a reckoning." Tom looked at his boss with a mixture of admiration and slight concern. "You're really going after them." "I'm not going after them," David corrected. "I'm giving them a choice. They can continue being the kind of place that humiliates people like my wife, or they can change. Completely, fundamentally, from the top down. And if they refuse to change..." David's smile faded. "Then they'll be out on the street. I own their building now, Tom. I own the ground they stand on, and I'm not going to let that ground be used for discrimination anymore." Over the next few weeks, David had his legal team prepare documents. He had his research team compile every piece of evidence they'd gathered into a comprehensive report. He had Tom draft a detailed proposal of exactly what changes Le Billionaire would need to make. Everything was ready. The trap was set. Gerard Blanc had no idea what was coming. None of them did. They thought they were untouchable, protected by their reputation and their exclusive clientele. They thought the world worked one way, where appearance and money mattered more than human dignity. David was about to teach them that the world could work very differently. And the lesson was going to be one they'd never forget. Gerard Blanc sat in the back of the taxi, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. He was nervous, though he tried not to show it. The building that housed his restaurant had been sold 3 weeks ago, and today he was meeting the new landlord for the first time to discuss his lease renewal. The timing couldn't be worse. Le Billionaire was struggling financially, something Gerard had managed to hide from most people. The loans were piling up. The exclusive image he had worked so hard to create cost a fortune to maintain. He needed this lease renewal. He needed the terms to stay the same, or ideally to improve. A rent increase would destroy him. The taxi pulled up to a sleek office building in Midtown. Gerard paid and stepped out, smoothing his jacket. He had dressed carefully today, wearing his best suit, the one he saved for important occasions. First impressions mattered. He had built his entire restaurant on that principle. The receptionist directed him to the 20th floor. Gerard rode the elevator up, mentally rehearsing what he would say. Be confident but humble. Show the value of having an established, prestigious restaurant in the building. Emphasize the clientele, the reputation, the exclusivity. The elevator doors opened. Gerard walked down a quiet hallway to Suite 2015. He knocked, and a young man answered the door almost immediately. "Mr. Blanc, I'm Tom. Thank you for coming." "Please come in." Gerard followed Tom into a conference room. It was professional, but not overly fancy. A long table, comfortable chairs, windows overlooking the city. And sitting at the head of the table was a man Gerard didn't recognize. He was in his 40s, dressed casually in slacks and a button-down shirt, no tie. Something about him seemed familiar, but Gerard couldn't place it. The man stood and extended his hand. "Gerard Blanc, thank you for meeting with me. I'm David." Gerard shook his hand, noting the firm grip, the direct eye contact. This was someone used to power, even if he dressed casually. "Thank you for having me. I'm eager to discuss the lease renewal for Le Billionaire. Please sit," David said, gesturing to a chair. "Would you like some coffee, water?" "Water would be fine, thank you." Tom poured water for everyone and then took a seat next to David. Gerard sat across from them, setting his leather portfolio on the table. He pulled out a folder with photos of the restaurant, press clippings, reviews from food critics, I wanted to bring some materials showing the value Le Bernardin Noir brings to your property, Gerard began. As you can see, we've received numerous accolades. We're rated one of the top restaurants in Manhattan. Our clientele includes some of the most influential people in the city. David looked at the photos briefly but didn't seem particularly impressed. I'm aware of your restaurant's reputation. I've done quite a bit of research on Le Bernardin Noir. Something in his tone made Gerard pause. Research? Extensive research, David said, leaning back in his chair. Before we discuss lease renewal, there are some things we need to talk about. Some concerns I have about how your restaurant operates. Gerard felt his stomach tighten. Concerns? I assure you we run a very professional establishment. All our licenses are up to date. We pass all health inspections with flying colors. This isn't about health inspections, David said quietly. He nodded to Tom, who pulled out a tablet and tapped on it a few times. Let me tell you a story, Gerard. A few weeks ago, a woman walked into your restaurant. She had just finished volunteering at a community center. She was wearing jeans and sneakers. She was hungry and wanted some lunch. Gerard felt his face go cold. Where was this going? Your host, Richard, took one look at her and decided she didn't belong. He told her you were fully booked, even though there were empty tables. He told her she didn't meet your dress code. He suggested she try a fast food place down the street. He made her feel worthless based on nothing but her appearance. Sir, I'm sorry if someone had a bad experience, but we do have standards. Le Bernardin Noir caters to a certain clientele. We have to maintain our image. That woman, David continued, his voice still calm but with steel underneath, was my wife. The words hit Gerard like a physical blow. He stared at David, his mind racing. The casual clothes, the familiar feeling. And then it clicked. David Chen, the tech billionaire. Gerard had seen his picture in magazines and news articles. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country. I had no idea, Gerard stammered. If we had known who she was, and that's exactly the problem, David cut him off. You didn't know who she was, so you treated her like garbage. But here's what you really need to understand, Gerard. It wouldn't matter if she was my wife or not. It wouldn't matter if she was wealthy or not. She's a human being who deserved basic respect and dignity, and your restaurant denied her both. Gerard's mouth opened and closed. He didn't know what to say. His mind was screaming at him to fix this, to apologize, to make it right. But he could see in David's eyes that this was bigger than one apology. David nodded to Tom again. Show him the videos. Tom turned the tablet around. Gerard watched, his face growing paler as Tom in casual clothes was turned away by Richard. The same Richard who had humiliated David's wife. Then the second video played, showing Tom in expensive clothes being welcomed warmly by the same host just hours later. Same person, same day, different clothes. David said, different treatment. That's not maintaining standards, Gerard. That's discrimination. We train our staff to maintain a certain atmosphere, Gerard tried to explain. The restaurant's success depends on exclusivity. Exclusivity based on what? On appearance? On assumptions about someone's bank account based on their shoes? David leaned forward. Let me show you something else. Tom brought up another document on the tablet. Gerard recognized it immediately. It was a compilation of online reviews, employee complaints, stories from people who had been turned away or mistreated by his restaurant. This isn't an isolated incident, David said. This is a pattern. A pattern you've created and encouraged. You've built a culture where judging people and making them feel small is part of the business model. Gerard felt cornered. Many high-end restaurants have standards. We're not unique in this. That doesn't make it right. And unlike other restaurants, you made the mistake of humiliating my wife. David's voice was still calm, but there was no mistaking the anger beneath it. Do you know what I did after that happened, Gerard? I bought your building. I own the property your restaurant sits on. Your lease is up for renewal in less than 3 months, and right now I'm trying to decide whether to renew it. The room felt like it was spinning. Gerard gripped the edge of the table. You bought the building? $47 million. Paid in cash. Closed 2 weeks ago. David slid a document across the table. It was the deed, showing ownership by a company that Gerard now realized must be one of David's. So let's talk about your lease renewal. But first, let's talk about changes. Changes? Comprehensive changes to how Le Bernardin Noir operates. Because I'm not going to own a building that houses discrimination. I'm not going to profit from rent paid by a business that treats people the way yours treated my wife. David pulled out a thick folder and set it on the table. In here is a detailed proposal. Requirements that must be met if you want to stay in my building. Tom is going to go through them with you. You'll have 24 hours to decide whether you agree to these terms. Gerard opened the folder with shaking hands. The first page was titled Required Changes for Lease Renewal. He began reading, his sense of dread growing with each line. Fire Richard and any other staff involved in discriminatory practices, he read aloud. Implement mandatory diversity and sensitivity training for all employees. Establish a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Create a mystery shopper program to ensure compliance. Dedicate 20% of nightly reservations to a dignity dining program for people of all economic backgrounds. Gerard looked up. 20%? That's dozens of seats every night. We can't afford to give away that much food. It's not free, David corrected. It's reduced price based on what people can afford. And you can afford it. I've seen your books, Gerard. You're spending a fortune maintaining an image of exclusivity. Spend that money on actual quality and actual service instead. But our existing clientele, they come to us because we're exclusive. If we start letting in just anyone, they'll go somewhere else. If your clientele only wants to eat at a place that discriminates against others, then let them leave, David said bluntly. You'll find new customers. Better customers. People who care about good food and good service, not about making sure the person at the next table looks wealthy enough. Gerard flipped through the pages. There were more requirements. Regular audits, community partnerships, public statements about the restaurant's new policies. It was overwhelming. It would change everything about Le Bernardin. This is not the restaurant I built, Gerard said quietly. No, David agreed. The restaurant you built humiliated my wife and countless others. This would be something better, something that actually deserves respect. And if I refuse? David's expression didn't change. Then your lease expires in 3 months and you're out. I'll find another restaurant to rent the space, one that shares my values. You'll have to find a new location if you can afford one. Given your financial situation, I'm guessing you can't. Gerard felt trapped. His mind raced through options, but there weren't many. Without this location, Le Bernardin was finished. The restaurant's reputation was tied to this address, this building. Starting over somewhere else was impossible with his current debt load. But accepting these terms meant giving up everything he had built. The exclusivity, the gatekeeping, the careful curation of clientele. It meant admitting he had been wrong. It meant fundamentally changing his business. I need to think about this, Gerard said finally. You have 24 hours, David repeated. Tom will be your point of contact. Call him with your decision. David stood, signaling the meeting was over. One more thing, Gerard. This isn't revenge. This isn't about punishing you. It's about making sure what happened to my wife doesn't happen to anyone else. You can be part of that solution, or you can be replaced by someone who will be. Gerard gathered his materials and left in a daze. The photos of his restaurant, the press clippings, the reviews, all of it seemed meaningless now. He had come here thinking he was negotiating with a landlord. Instead, he had walked into a reckoning. As he rode the elevator down, Gerard realized he had a choice to make. Hold on to the past and lose everything, or change and possibly build something better. He had 24 hours to decide what kind of person he wanted to be. Gerard didn't sleep that night. He sat in his apartment, the folder from David open on his coffee table, staring at the requirements that would either save or destroy his restaurant. The numbers kept running through his head. 20% of seats for reduced price dining. The cost of firing and replacing staff. The training programs. The audits. But something else kept creeping into his thoughts. The look on David's face when he talked about his wife. The pain underneath the calm professional tone. Gerard had caused that pain. His restaurant, his policies, his carefully cultivated culture of exclusivity had hurt someone deeply. He thought about Richard, his host for 5 years. Richard was good at his job if you defined the job the way Gerard had defined it. Richard protected the restaurant's image. Richard kept out the wrong kind of people. But watching that video of Richard turning away the same person twice, treating them completely differently based only on clothes, Gerard had felt sick. When had he become this person? When had running a good restaurant become about keeping people out instead of welcoming them in? Gerard pulled out his phone and scrolled through old photos. There was one from 12 years ago, opening night of Le Bernardin Noir. He looked so happy, so proud. Back then, it had been about the food, about creating amazing dining experiences. When had it become about exclusivity and status? He thought about his training in Paris working under Chef Laurent. He remembered one night when a homeless man had wandered into the restaurant. The other staff wanted to call the police, but Chef Laurent had quietly taken the man to the kitchen, fed him a full meal, and sent him away with leftovers. Gerard had asked why, and Chef Laurent had said something Gerard had never forgotten. We cook food. Food is for everyone. The day we decide some people don't deserve to eat our cooking is the day we lose our souls as chefs. When had Gerard lost his soul? At 6 a.m, Gerard made his decision. He called Tom's number. This is Tom. It's Gerard Blank. I accept the terms. All of them. There was a pause. You're sure? I'm sure. When do we start? 2 days later, Gerard called a staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the restaurant an hour before opening. The servers, the kitchen staff, the hosts, the bartenders. They all looked nervous. Staff meetings were rare and usually meant bad news. Gerard stood at the front, his hands clasped in front of him. I need to tell you all something. We've been doing things wrong. I've been leading this restaurant wrong. And that's going to change starting now. He told them everything. About Lisa being turned away. About David buying the building. About the requirements for keeping their lease. And about his decision to accept those requirements and transform Le Bernardin Noir completely. Richard, Gerard said, turning to his head host, I'm letting you go. Not because I hate you, but because I trained you to treat people the way you did. I created this culture and you followed it. That's on me, but we can't move forward with the same people who were part of the old way. Richard's face went red, then pale. You're firing me because I did exactly what you told me to do? I'm firing you because I was wrong to tell you to do it. And I'm sorry for that. You'll get 3 months severance and I'll give you a good reference for jobs that match what you're actually good at. But you can't stay here. Richard left without another word. Gerard watched him go, feeling the weight of the decision but knowing it was right. Over the next month, Le Bernardin Noir transformed. Gerard hired a new host, a woman named Patricia who had worked her way up from serving at diners and family restaurants. She understood that every customer mattered, regardless of how they looked. The entire staff went through 3 days of intensive training on diversity, inclusion, and respectful service. At first, some of the staff resisted. They liked the old way, the prestige of working at an exclusive restaurant. But slowly, as they talked about their own experiences of being judged and dismissed, something shifted. The Dignity Dining program launched 6 weeks after Gerard accepted David's terms. 20% of the reservations each night were available at reduced prices, sliding scale based on what people could afford. A nurse working double shifts could have a nice meal. A teacher celebrating a small victory could experience fine dining. A retired couple on a fixed income could mark their anniversary somewhere special. Gerard was terrified the first night of the new program. He was sure his regular clients would be offended, would leave, would destroy the restaurant's reputation. He stood near the entrance, watching as the dinner service began. The early reservations included a mix. Some of the usual wealthy patrons dressed in expensive clothes, but also a young couple clearly dressed in their best but still modest outfits. An older man in a clean but worn suit. A woman in scrubs who had come straight from the hospital. Patricia greeted each person the same way with genuine warmth and respect. The servers treated every table with equal care and attention. And something magical happened. The restaurant didn't fall apart. The wealthy patrons didn't leave in disgust. Instead, the atmosphere became warmer somehow, more real, more human. Gerard watched a businessman in a $3,000 suit chat with the woman in scrubs at the next table. She had saved a child's life that day in the ER. He was fascinated, asking questions about her work. By the end of the night, he had picked up her bill anonymously. The older man in the worn suit turned out to be a retired professor. A young couple at a nearby table, tech entrepreneurs, spent half their meal talking to him about philosophy and life. They exchanged contact information before leaving. It wasn't what Gerard had expected. He had thought mixing economic classes would create tension. Instead, it created connection. People were interested in each other, not just the status of the restaurant. 3 months in, something happened that Gerard never anticipated. A food critic from the New York Times came to review the new Le Bernardin Noir. Gerard was nervous. The review could make or break them. When it published, Gerard read it 3 times to make sure he understood it correctly. The critic praised the food, which was still excellent. But she spent most of the review talking about the atmosphere, the inclusivity, the way the restaurant had become a place where humanity mattered more than status. Le Bernardin Noir has transformed from an exclusive restaurant into an exceptional one, she wrote. The food is as good as ever, but now it's served with actual heart. In a city where too many establishments use exclusivity as a substitute for quality, Le Bernardin Noir has proven that true excellence means